In the thick, wet heat of a Brazilian summer, Dr. Elena Marquez stepped off a small rattling bus and into a village so quiet, it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Trees hung heavy with moss. Puddles from last night's rain shimmered under the midday sun. But there were no birds singing, no children laughing, only the low hum of insects and one sound louder than the rest, the buzz of mosquitoes. Elena was an epidemiologist. That means she studied how diseases spread and how to stop them. She worked for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, in the United States. But right now, she was thousands of miles away, deep in the Amazon region, because something strange was happening here. A week earlier, the CDC had received urgent reports from local health workers. People in this village, mostly children and older adults, were getting very sick. They had high fevers, terrible headaches, and their skin turned yellow. Some even bled from their gums. Doctors in the nearest town didn't know what it was at first. Then one of them remembered an old enemy: yellow fever. Yellow fever is a virus. It doesn't spread from person to person. It spreads through the bite of a mosquito, specifically a type called Aedes aegypti. This mosquito is small, black with white stripes on its legs. It likes to live near people. It bites during the day, not just at night, and it's very good at spreading disease. Elena had seen yellow fever before, in textbooks, in labs, even in past outbreaks. But this felt different. The cases were rising faster than usual. The mosquitoes seemed bolder, biting more often, even in bright sunlight. And the usual sprays and traps weren't working as well. She walked down a muddy path, her boots sinking slightly with each step. A woman in a faded blue dress stood in a doorway holding a child wrapped in a thin blanket. The child's eyes were glassy, his skin pale with a yellow tint. Elena's chest tightened. She nodded gently to the mother and kept walking toward the small clinic at the edge of the village. Inside, the air was hot and still. A single fan turned slowly overhead. 2 nurses worked quietly, wiping brows, checking pulses, writing notes in a worn ledger. On cots lined against the wall, 6 patients lay sweating and restless. One man coughed weakly. Another stared at the ceiling, too tired to move. Elena introduced herself and got to work. She took blood samples, checked temperatures, and asked careful questions. How long had they been sick? Where had they been bitten? Had they traveled? Most had not left the village in months. That meant the virus was spreading right here, locally. Later that afternoon, she set up a small lab table under a tarp near the clinic. With gloves on and a headlamp shining, she prepared slides from the blood samples. Under the microscope, she saw what she feared: signs of the yellow fever virus. But something else caught her eye. The mosquitoes caught in nearby traps looked slightly different, slightly larger with darker markings. She bagged a few live ones in a sealed container for further testing. As dusk fell, the buzzing grew louder. Mosquitoes swarmed in the humid air. Elena pulled her long sleeves tight and sprayed repellent on her neck. She sat on a wooden stool outside the clinic, notebook in hand, writing fast. The numbers didn't lie. In just 10 days, 23 people had fallen ill. 3 had died. At this rate, the whole village could be infected within weeks. She thought about the bigger picture. Brazil had seen yellow fever outbreaks before, but usually in forested areas far from towns. This village was near a newly cleared patch of land, trees cut down for farming. That kind of change often pushes wild animals, and the mosquitoes that feed on them, closer to people. And with warmer temperatures from climate change, mosquitoes could live longer and spread farther. Elena knew time was running out. She needed help fast. She walked back to the clinic and borrowed a satellite phone. The signal was weak, but after several tries, she got through to her team in Atlanta. "It's worse than we thought," she said, her voice low but urgent. "The aides here are acting differently. They're resisting the usual insecticides, and the outbreak is growing fast. If we don't act now, this could jump to nearby towns or even cities." She paused, listening to the static on the line. Then she added, "We're not just dealing with an outbreak. We're facing a new kind of threat. And if we don't stop it here, it won't stay here." After the call, she sat alone under a sky full of stars. The jungle around her was alive with sounds: frogs, crickets, distant howler monkeys. But beneath it all, that same soft, dangerous buzz returned. She zipped her jacket up to her chin and stared into the dark. She hadn't come here to start a war. She'd come to help. But as she watched another mosquito land on her sleeve, only to be swatted away, She realized something had changed. This wasn't just about treating patients anymore. It was about stopping a tiny creature that killed more people every year than sharks, snakes, or lions combined. Mosquitoes were the deadliest animals on Earth. And by sounding the alarm, by demanding action, by refusing to look away, Elena had just declared war on them. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. The truth was in her notes, in her samples, in the quiet fear of the villagers. The battle had begun, and she would not leave until it was won, or until she had given everything trying. Elena's report traveled fast. Within hours, it reached top health officials in the United States. Within a day, it was shared with the World Health Organization in Geneva. By the end of the week, scientists in Japan, South Africa, India, and Brazil were reading her data, comparing it to their own, and feeling the same cold worry in their stomachs. What Elena had found in that quiet village wasn't just a local problem. It was a warning. Mosquitoes were changing. They were spreading disease faster, surviving longer, and resisting the chemicals meant to kill them. And with more forests being cut down and temperatures rising around the world, their territory was growing. In Atlanta, Elena barely slept. She spent her days in video calls, sharing maps, graphs, and photos of the sick villagers. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were tired. She kept saying the same thing. This isn't just yellow fever. It's a sign of what's coming. Then came the call from Geneva. The WHO wanted her to come speak at an emergency meeting. They needed her to explain what was happening and what could be done. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in a large, quiet room in Switzerland. Men and women in suits sat around a long table. Some were doctors. Others were government leaders or scientists. All of them had seen outbreaks before. But none had seen mosquitoes act like this. Elena didn't use fancy words. She showed photos of the sick child, the empty streets, the traps full of mosquitoes. She played a short video of villagers swatting at the air, even in daylight. Then she pointed to a world map covered in red dots. These dots are outbreaks, she said. Not just yellow fever, dengue, Zika, chikungunya, all spread by the same kind of mosquito. And they're moving into new places, places that never had them before. A man from Kenya spoke up. In Nairobi, we had our worst dengue season last year. Hospitals were full. We used every spray we had. It didn't stop them. A woman from Thailand nodded. Same in Bangkok. Mosquitoes are biting in shopping malls now. Not just in swamps. Elena took a deep breath. That's because they've learned to live with us. They breed in flower pots, old tires, even bottle caps with a little rainwater, and they're getting smarter. Then a quiet voice came from the back of the room. What if we stop trying to kill them? And stop them from being born instead? All eyes turned to Dr. Kenji Tanaka. He was a Japanese scientist, thin and soft-spoken with glasses and a calm face. He worked in a lab that studied genes, the tiny instructions inside every living thing. Kenji explained his idea. Scientists had found a way to change the genes of male mosquitoes. These changed males would still look and act normal, but when they mated with wild females, their babies wouldn't survive. No babies meant fewer mosquitoes. Over time, the whole population could shrink, maybe even disappear in certain areas. It's called a gene drive, Kenji said. It spreads the change quickly through the mosquito family. One generation leads to the next, and the effect grows. Some people looked excited. Others looked worried. But what if it spreads too far? Asked a woman from Germany. What if it hurts other insects? Or birds that eat mosquitoes? Kenji nodded. Those are fair questions. That's why we tested carefully, first in labs, then in closed areas. We watch every step. Elena listened closely. She had heard of this idea before, but never seen real results. Now, with outbreaks growing, it might be the only hope. After the meeting, Elena and Kenji talked for hours in a quiet cafe near Lake Geneva. Steam rose from their cups of tea. Rain tapped gently on the windows. You really think it can work? Elena asked. I think it can help, Kenji said. But it's not a magic fix. It needs to be part of a bigger plan, better clinics, clean water, education, and trust. People must believe in it. Elena knew he was right. In her village, people were scared of sprays, of doctors, of anything new. If they didn't understand the science, they'd say no, even if it saved lives. Back in Atlanta, Elena's team began planning. The WHO gave them emergency funding. A small island chain in the South Pacific was chosen for the first real test. Why there? Because the islands were isolated, If something went wrong, it wouldn't spread to big cities. Also, dengue fever had been a nightmare there for years. People were ready for change. Elena flew to the islands with Kenji and a small team. They met with village leaders, nurses, teachers, and fishermen. They didn't bring fancy promises. They brought facts, pictures, and questions. What do you want? Elena asked a group of mothers one evening, sitting on woven mats under a thatched roof. We want our children to play outside without getting sick, one woman said. We're tired of fevers in the night, another added. If your method can stop that, we will try. Over the next few weeks, the team trained local health workers. They set up mosquito traps. They taught people how to dump out standing water. And they explained again and again how the special male mosquitoes would be released. Not to bite, not to harm, but to mate and reduce the next generation. The day of the first release, the sky was clear. A small drone hummed overhead, dropping tiny containers filled with harmless male mosquitoes. Children watched with wide eyes. Elders nodded slowly. Elena stood beside Kenji, her heart pounding. This is it, she whispered. It's just the beginning, he replied. In the weeks that followed, something amazing happened. The number of wild AIDS mosquitoes dropped, fast. Traps that once held hundreds now held only a few, then even fewer. No new dengue cases were reported in the test villages, but Elena didn't celebrate yet. She knew mosquitoes were clever. Nature always finds a way. And somewhere, in another village, another forest, another city, the war was still going on. Still, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, humans could finally fight back not with fear but with smart, careful science. And with people working together from Brazil to Japan to a tiny island in the Pacific, they might just win. Life on the islands began to change. Children played outside longer. Mothers hung laundry in the sun without swatting at the air. The constant fear of fever, the kind that made parents check their children's foreheads 3 times a night, started to fade. Elena watched it all with quiet pride. The plan was working. For 3 months, the team released the special male mosquitoes every week. Each batch was bred in a small lab set up in a converted schoolhouse. The males couldn't bite. Only females bite. And they carried a genetic change that made their offspring die before they could grow up. Fewer babies meant fewer mosquitoes. Fewer mosquitoes meant fewer bites. Fewer bites meant fewer cases of dengue. By the 4th month, mosquito traps showed a 90% drop in AIDS aegypti. In the clinic, the fever log stayed empty for weeks. A nurse told Elena, "It feels like a miracle." But Elena knew it wasn't magic. It was science, hard work, and trust. Then everything changed. One morning, a fisherman from a nearby island arrived in a small boat, his face pale and sweaty. He had a high fever, a rash and pain behind his eyes, classic signs of dengue. But that island wasn't part of the test zone. It hadn't received the special mosquitoes. Worse, when Elena's team tested local mosquitoes there, they found something strange, a mix of old and new genes. It looked like the wild mosquitoes had somehow changed, maybe even developed a way to resist the gene drive. Panic spread fast. News traveled by radio, by boat, by word of mouth. "The bugs are fighting back," people whispered. The scientists made them stronger. Back in the capital city, reporters wrote headlines like, "Genetic experiment fails and mosquitoes outsmart science." A video went viral showing a man shaking a jar full of mosquitoes, shouting, "They're mutating." Even though it wasn't true, people believed it. Funding for the project began to shrink. One major donor pulled out. A government official in Europe called for a full stop to all gene drive releases. "We don't know the long-term effects," he said on live TV. "We could be making things worse." Elena felt the weight of it all. She sat alone on the beach one night listening to the waves. The stars were bright, but her mind was dark with doubt. Had she been too hopeful? Too sure that science could fix everything? She thought of the sick fishermen, the worried mothers, the critics shouting from faraway offices who had never seen a child shake with fever. The next day, she called a meeting with Kenji and the local health team. They sat under a big tree away from cameras and rumors. "We can't quit," Elena said, "but we can't ignore the problem either. Maybe the gene drive isn't enough by itself." Kenji nodded. "Nature adapts. We must too." They decided to listen, to the people, to the land, to the mosquitoes themselves. They visited every village not just to explain, but to ask, "What do you see? What's working? What's not?" An old woman named Lena, who had lived on the island her whole life, told them something important. "You focus on the sky," she said, pointing to where the drones flew. "But the danger is on the ground, in the buckets, the cans, the broken pots where rain collects. That's where the babies grow." She was right. Even with fewer adult mosquitoes, any bit of standing water could become a nursery for the next generation. The team had been so focused on the high-tech solution that they'd forgotten the simple one, so they changed their plan. They kept releasing the special mails, but now they added something new. Every household got a visit from a local health worker. Together, they walked around the yard, dumping out old water, covering tanks, and cleaning gutters. Schools taught children how to spot mosquito breeding spots. Fishermen used larvicide tablets, safe, slow-release chemicals that kill mosquito larvae but don't harm fish or people, in their rain barrels. Most importantly, the islanders took charge. They formed mosquito watch groups. Young people made posters. Elders shared old tricks like using neem leaves to repel insects. The project was no longer something done to them. It was something they owned. Slowly, trust returned. The sick fisherman recovered. No new cases spread from his island. And when scientists tested mosquitoes again, they found no dangerous mutations, just normal variation, the kind that happens in all living things. The scare had been real, but the fear had grown bigger than the facts. Elena learned a hard lesson. Science alone can't win a war. You need people. You need patience. You need to listen as much as you speak. By the 6th month, both islands were dengue-free. Tourists started returning. A local teacher wrote a song about the quiet summer, the first in memory without fever dreams and midnight trips to the clinic. Elena stood on the dock one morning, watching children paddle in the shallows. A little girl ran up to her, holding a jar with a single mosquito inside. "Is this one of the bad kind?" she asked. Elena looked closely. It was a harmless type, big, slow, and not known to carry disease. "No," she smiled. "This one just likes flowers." The girl nodded seriously and let it go. "Good, we don't need more enemies." Elena watched the tiny insect fly into the sunlight. She knew the fight wasn't over. Mosquitoes would keep changing. New viruses might appear. But now the people had tools and knowledge and each other, and that, she thought, was the real victory. Not killing every mosquito, but learning how to live without fear. The good news from the islands did not stay quiet for long. Photos of healthy children, clean yards, and empty fever logs began appearing in global health reports. For a moment, it seemed like hope was spreading faster than the disease ever had. But not everyone was happy. In Nairobi, a group of activists gathered outside a major health conference. They held signs that read "No to lab mosquitoes" and "Don't play God with nature." Their voices were loud, and their message spread quickly online. They claimed the Gene Drive project was a secret plan by rich countries to test dangerous science on poor villages. One video, edited to look like a documentary, showed blurry footage of mosquitoes and a voice saying, "They're making superbugs." Elena saw the video on her phone one night. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't true, but it felt true to many people. Fear, once planted, was hard to pull out. Soon, angry emails flooded her inbox. A university in Europe canceled a talk she was supposed to give. A news channel called her a biocolonialist, a word she had to look up. It meant someone who uses science to control others, like old empires did with armies and laws. She felt hurt, but also ashamed. Had she and her team been so focused on the science that they forgot how it looked to others? Had they spoken for the villagers instead of letting them speak for themselves? Back in Atlanta, funding for the next phase of the project was put on hold. "We need more proof," said a government official, "and we need public trust." Elena knew he was right. Without trust, even the best science would fail. At the same time, Kenji was working day and night in his lab in Tokyo. He had heard the criticism too. Instead of getting angry, he got curious. What if the gene drive could be safer? What if it could turn itself off after a few generations so it wouldn't spread forever? He and his team tested a new idea called a daisy chain gene drive. It worked like a row of falling dominoes. The genetic change would pass to the next generation, then the next, but after 3 or 4 steps it would stop on its own. That way, if something went wrong, it wouldn't spread across continents. It would fade away like a ripple in a pond. When Kenji shared the results with Elena, she felt a spark of hope again. "This could answer their fears," she said. But she also knew that high-tech fixes weren't enough. She remembered Lena's words on the island. The danger is on the ground. So Elena turned her attention to Uganda. There, a group of community health workers had been fighting malaria for years. Not with fancy labs, but with simple, smart actions. They taught families to sleep under bed nets treated with safe insecticide. They showed farmers how to drain puddles after rain. They even used old plastic bottles to make simple traps that caught mosquito larvae. Best of all, they used local knowledge. In one village, women mixed ash and water to pour into breeding sites. It killed larvae without hurting plants or animals. In another, boys built small covers for water jars using scrap metal. Elena flew to Kampala and met with the team. She didn't come as an expert with answers. She came as a student with questions. What works here? She asked. Everything that comes from us, said Grace, a nurse who had lost 2 siblings to malaria as a child. When outsiders bring solutions, they leave. But when we build the answer, it stays. Elena listened, and she learned. Back home, she changed her whole approach. Instead of pushing one big global plan, she helped design a new strategy: mosquito sovereignty. The idea was simple. Every community would choose its own mix of tools. Gene-drive mosquitoes if they wanted, bed nets if they preferred, clean water projects, education, or all of the above. Scientists would support them, not lead them. In Brazil, villagers used drones to map breeding sites from the air, then sent youth groups to clean them on foot. In Thailand, schools held mosquito-free week with songs, games, and prizes for the cleanest yard. In Kenya, farmers planted certain flowers that attracted mosquito predators like dragonflies. Slowly, the story changed. News reports began to show local heroes, mothers, teachers, teenagers leading the fight. The focus shifted from foreign scientists to community power. Even the critics began to soften. One activist visited the islands and saw children playing safely. She wrote a new post. Maybe it's not about the tool. It's about who holds it. Elena still faced hard days. Some outbreaks flared up. Some governments said no to new methods. But now she didn't feel alone. She was part of a web of people. Scientists, grandmothers, students, farmers, all working in their own way. One evening, she video called Kenji. He showed her a graph. Dengue cases in test areas had dropped by 75%. Malaria deaths in Uganda were at a 10-year low. We're not winning with one weapon, Elena said. We're winning because we're using many, and listening to those who live with the problem every day. Kenji smiled. The war isn't against mosquitoes. It's against fear, silence, and helplessness. And that war, we can win. Elena looked out her window at the setting sun. Somewhere right now, a child was sleeping safely under a net. A mother was dumping out a bucket of rainwater. A boy was releasing a harmless mosquito back into the air. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, it felt like humanity was fighting smart and together. 5 years passed. The world didn't forget the mosquito, but it stopped fearing it like a ghost in the dark. In clinics, schools, and villages across the globe, people had learned how to live with less danger and more hope. Elena Marquez stood once again on the red dirt path of the Brazilian village, where it all began. The air was still warm, the trees still tall, but everything else had changed. Children ran barefoot through the square, laughing and chasing a handmade soccer ball. Bright laundry hung from lines, and the buzz that once filled the evening air, it was gone, or at least quiet enough that no one flinched when they heard it. She walked slowly toward the small clinic. It was now painted blue with a new roof and a sign that read, Community Health Center. Inside, a young nurse named Rafaela, born and raised in the village, greeted her with a wide smile. We've had 0 yellow fever cases in 3 years, Rafaela said proudly. Not one, Elena nodded, her throat tight. She remembered the cots, the feverish eyes, the silence. Now the room was bright, clean, and full of life. A group of mothers sat in a circle, learning how to spot early signs of illness and when to seek help. On the wall hung a poster showing mosquito breeding sites, with check marks next to the ones they'd already fixed. Later that afternoon, Elena visited the home of the elder who had once handed her a woven bracelet. His name was Sojuan. He was older now, his steps slower, but his eyes were sharp. You came back, he said, sitting on a wooden bench under a mango tree. I promised I would, Elena replied. He handed her a small cup of strong, sweet coffee. Then he pointed to a boy playing near a rain barrel. That's my grandson. He's never had dengue, never even had a high fever. Elena watched the boy splash water on his face, carefree. No fear, no panic. Just a normal childhood. Xiao Zhuang leaned closer. You didn't kill the mosquito, he said softly. You taught us how to live without fear of it. His words stayed with her long after she left. Back in her role as a global health advisor for the United Nations, Elena had seen the change spread far beyond Brazil. In Sri Lanka, malaria had been wiped out completely. In Mexico City, dengue cases dropped by 60% after schools joined the Clean Yard campaign. Even in places where gene-drive mosquitoes were used, they were only one part of a larger plan, always guided by local leaders, never forced from the outside. The war hadn't been won with bombs or poisons. It had been won with knowledge, teamwork, and respect. Of course, challenges remained. New viruses still appeared. In some remote areas, access to care was hard, and climate change meant mosquitoes would keep moving into new places. But now the world was ready. Early warning systems sent alerts when mosquito numbers rose. Mobile apps helped people report breeding sites. Vaccines for dengue and malaria were becoming common in childhood shots. Most importantly, people no longer waited for outsiders to save them. In Uganda, a group of teenage girls built solar-powered mosquito traps from old electronics. In the Philippines, fishermen used nets treated with natural oils that repelled insects without harming fish. In Brazil, former patients now trained as community health workers, teaching others what they'd learned. Elena often said in speeches, "The deadliest animal on earth is small, but the strongest force against it is human connection." One evening, as she prepared to leave the village for the last time, the children gathered around her. They didn't ask for gifts or promises. They asked questions. Do mosquitoes still bite in other places?
One girl asked. Yes, Elena said.
But people there are learning too. Will you come back? A boy asked. She smiled. Not as a doctor, but as a friend, and maybe to play soccer. They laughed and cheered. As her bus pulled away, Elena looked out the window. Fireflies blinked in the dusk, tiny lights dancing in the warm air. They looked like mosquitoes at first glance, but harmless, beautiful even. Nature wasn't the enemy. It was part of the balance. She thought about all the people she'd met, the worried mothers, the quiet scientists, the bold teenagers, the wise elders. None of them had set out to be heroes. They just wanted their families to be safe, and together they had changed the world. The war wasn't over. Mosquitoes would always be there, buzzing in the background of human life. But now humanity had the tools, the knowledge, and the will to protect itself, not through fear, but through care. Elena leaned back in her seat, tired but peaceful. She didn't whisper a victory cry. She didn't need to. The quiet laughter of children playing in a once silent village was victory enough. And as the bus rolled down the road, carrying her toward the next challenge, she knew one thing for sure. As long as people kept listening, learning and helping each other, they would never fight alone again.